Some superhero games are good, some superhero games are bad, but most occupy a kind of grey area somewhere in the middle. A vast chasm of mediocrity, home to such nothing titles as Guardians of the Galaxy, the Telltale series, Green Lantern, Rise of the Manhunters, and Watchmen, The End Is Nigh. But now and again, a legitimately good superhero game falls through the net, gets forgotten about, or just doesn't get the love that it deserves. Hey heroes, I'm Josh from Panels to Pixels, and today we're taking a look at 5 criminally underrated superhero games. Number 1. Ghost Rider. The spooky season may be long behind us by the time this video comes out, but it's never too late to take a ride with the spirit of vengeance. Ghost Rider for the PlayStation 2 was released in 2007, alongside the film of the same name. Like the movie it's based on, this game is trashy, a bit rough around the edges, and a whole lot of fun. Play as everybody's favourite toasty ghost in a short but sweet campaign penned by Marvel writers Garth Ennis and Jimmy Palmiotti, which fuses the mid-2000s edginess of the Nicolas Cage film with the supernatural 70s weirdness of the comics. This game mashes together the hack-and-slash balls-to-the-wall action of the original God of War games with the two-wheeling vehicular mayhem of Road Rash to create a surprisingly varied and devilishly delightful superhero game. In fact, I talked about this one a few years ago in a video called Marvel Games That Are Shameless God of War Clones, and I've gone back to revisit it a few times since then because it's just so damn fun. Chain-whipping demons in the fiery pits of hell, and then popping wheelies on the hell cycle as you burn rubber along post-apocalyptic freeways. This game is more metal than a Slayer concert in a steel mill. Ghost Rider got mixed reviews upon release, owing largely to the fact that it was a late release on the PS2, and derivative of a lot of other games. But in hindsight, I think this game holds up better than anybody ever expected it would. Sure, it's cheap thrills and the novelty soon wears off, but for the 3 or 4 hours it will take you to beat the story, nothing will make you feel like more of a flaming skull-headed badass biker boy. Oh, also, Blade is an unlockable player character, so, enough said. Number 2. Spider-Man 2, Enter Electro. Neversoft Spider-Man for the PlayStation, N64, Dreamcast and PC is one of the most beloved superhero games of all time. Its sequel? Not so much. But honestly, if you love the first game, there's still so much worth sticking around for in 2001's Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro. For this PlayStation exclusive title, developer Vicarious Vision took over production duties, but were able to make use of the same game engine and all of the assets from Neversoft's Spider-Man. As a result, it plays and feels exactly the same as the first game, just decidedly cheaper. Gone was the ripping Tommy Tallarico soundtrack in favour of generic stock music, and the story is noticeably shorter and smaller scale. Nothing even comes close to the sphincter-tightening intensity of the final Monster Ock fight in the first game. But if Neversoft Spidey is a 10, which it is, Enter Electro is a solid 8.5, and that's nothing to sneeze at. The Technicolor fog-covered environments are gone, and Spidey can finally roam the streets of New York City. It's kinda jarring at first seeing this gritty, semi-realistic take on the wall crawler's unfriendly neighbourhood compared to the cartoony setting of the original game. It's like the first game is an issue of Amazing Spider-Man. Big budget, bright and colourful, and full of A-list villains. But the sequel is like some weirdo issue of Web of Spider-Man from the 80s. Darker and lower rent, with characters like Hammerhead and Shocker. I kinda love it for that. You also get cameos from wider Marvel Universe characters like X-Men's Beast and a nod to the mighty Thor. And this game goes ridiculously hard on the unlockable costumes, with all of the suits from the first game, plus some super deep cuts like the Spider Phoenix from Spider-Man issue 25, the Alex Ross designed suit for the first movie, and the Venom symbiote that an alternative universe version of Peter Parker wears in Earth X. Following the September 11th attacks that year, Enter Electro was delayed in order to remove references to the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. With the PS2 well into its second year and the first movie game releasing just 6 months later, Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro was largely ignored, and I think that's a real shame. Neversoft Spider-Man remains one of the best Spidey games ever made, and this sequel is essentially like its own full-length standalone DLC. It's like the Miles Morales to its Spider-Man PS4, if you will. Besides, who says you can have too much of a good thing? Number 3, The Adventures of Batman and Robin, Sega Mega Drive version. When I started thinking about underrated superhero games to include in this video, I knew I had to have a Mega Drive title on the list. There are so many great comic book games that not enough people talk about that came out on this console. From X-Men 2 Clone Wars, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles The Hyperstone Heist, and of course Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage. Not now, Maximum Carnage, holy sh**! And then there's 1995's The Adventures of Batman and Robin. Based on the iconic Batman the Animated Series, this run-and-gun side-scroller sees the dynamic duo going up against some of Gotham's most nefarious ne'er-do-wells. This game is, pardon the pun, batshit insane. Basing a Contra-style 2D shooter around a character with a noted disdain for firearms was, well, let's say an interesting choice. That paired with the brutal difficulty and the fact that most players would have been expecting a more traditional action platformer like the SNES title of the same name mean that this game has been largely forgotten by all but the most hardcore run-and-gunners. Unlike the Super Nintendo version, The Adventures of Batman and Robin on the Mega Drive doesn't quite capture the tone of the animated series, and at times the vaguely off-model character sprites make this feel like an unlicensed bootleg Batman title. But, and I cannot stress this enough, this game is a masterpiece. Developer Clockwork Tortoise turned every single action-packed level into a technical showcase for what the Mega Drive was really capable of. Crazy boss fights and gloriously mind-bending graphics push the system's blast processing to its limits. And then there's the dark, pumping techno soundtrack. There's nothing I can say that can accurately convey the altered state of consciousness that this music puts you into as you fire off 1,000,000 batarangs per second at every corner of the screen. So, instead, I'm just going to play you a sample and we can pretend that it's 1995 and we're at a warehouse rave. The Adventures of Batman and Robin is an insanely ambitious game for the system. Not only one of the most underrated superhero games, but one of the most underrated Mega Drive games ever released. Seriously, why does nobody ever talk about this one? Number 4, Captain America Super Soldier. Speaking of underrated, Captain America the First Avenger is, for my money, the most underrated movie in the entire MCU. It's got Nazi arse-kicking, it's got romance, it's got the tooch, and it also had a criminally underrated video game in 2011's Captain America Super Soldier for the PS3 and Xbox 360. I covered this one last year in my mammoth Every MCU Game Ranked and Reviewed video, in which this title stood out as the clear winner, head and shoulders above all those other Sega-produced MCU tie-in titles. Now this one is riffing pretty heavily on the Batman Arkham games, so if you're a fan of that classic 1-2 strike counter style of combat, I highly recommend checking this one out. The game even features an Arkham Asylum style map of a Hydra fort, full of puzzles to solve and Nazi paraphernalia to collect, which is a bit weird when you think about it, but ooh, intel points. But where this game really differentiates itself from countless other Arkham clones is with the inclusion of Captain America's mighty metal shield. This adds a whole new dimension to the gameplay, and it feels so satisfying when you deflect a grenade or frisbee the vibranium disc through a barricade of bad guy faces. There are also these Prince of Persia style acrobatic sections, which, while not the most inspired or exciting moments of gameplay, they do a good job at breaking up the monotony of combat. Chris Evans reprises his role as the star-spangled man with a plan, and in a rare case of a movie actor not phoning it in when it comes to video game voice acting, he is really, genuinely, legitimately great. Evans totally embodies Steve Rogers on screen, and he brings that same enthusiasm to the game, delivering every line with straight-faced sincerity and really selling some otherwise tropey dialogue. Apparently, the actor had such a good time playing the finished product, he worked with fight choreographers to incorporate some of the combat moves from the game into the second Captain America movie, Winter Soldier. While the short development time and low budget is sometimes apparent in the game's slippy slidey controls, a floppy camera, and generally low visual fidelity, Captain America Super Soldier is a surprisingly enjoyable title, undeserving of the middling review scores it first received. It totally nails the World War II era sci-fi setting, giving us a look at some of the maniacal mechs that Hydra had been working on behind the scenes. Plus, it even takes a stab at some classic Cap villains from the comics that hadn't yet appeared in the MCU. All in all, it's a great way to play as the Sentinel of Liberty. And if Marvel's Avengers has left a bad taste in your mouth, this almost 10-year-old game somehow manages to perfectly capture the Captain America experience. Number 5. Batman Arkham Origins. Here's another title that I've talked about many times here on Panels to Pixels. 2013's Batman Arkham Origins is something of an outlier in the wider Arkham franchise. Released between Rocksteady's Arkham City and Arkham Knight, this game was a prequel to the series developed by a different studio, WB Montreal. In a similar way to Spiderman 2 Enter Electro, Arkham Origins uses the same game engine and assets from Arkham City, but was met with shrugs by players due to a quote-unquote proper sequel being on the horizon. But those who did take the time to play this Batman game were rewarded with a smaller scale tale of a Dark Knight early in his crime-fighting career. The snow-covered Gotham City gives Origins a totally unique aesthetic, and the game's story shows us just how brutal and unrelenting a night in the life of Bruce Wayne can be. Face off against 8 of the world's most deadly assassins as they compete for a $50 million bounty placed on Batman's head by the mysterious Black Mask. WB Montreal didn't set out to reinvent the wheel with their contribution to the Arkham canon, but instead Origins offers up more of the Batman bad guy buttocks bashing brilliance that players had come to adore, now with added festive cheer. It's wild to me that this game hasn't yet received the current gen remaster treatment alongside the Return to Arkham collection. It's actually a tighter and more balanced installment than Arkham Knight turned out to be, even if it doesn't offer much in terms of innovation to the franchise. And while WB Games might think that this title is better left forgotten about, I implore you to check out Batman Arkham Origins if you haven't already. Thanks for watching this video. If you love superhero games and comic books, then you have come to the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to Panels to Pixels and give that bell icon a little ring-a-ding-ding so you never miss out on future videos. Stay safe everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!